Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, the Elden Ring trailer has leaked. Now, it is a very potato quality one doing the rounds. People have had to stitch together 4 different versions of different bits and pieces that have leaked to make something approximating a 2-minute full trailer. But there's enough information out there to obviously talk about. It is a big old deal. I do feel sorry for the FromSoft devs because an insider report has touched on the fact that the game has been delayed internally a whole bunch of times, hence the fact we haven't heard about it in a while, mostly because of the pandemic, because of last year. And it sucks that one of their, the big reveals of the game is this sort of weird potato off-camera thing where a dude is literally just sitting with his phone camera filming a screen and then just posting it online. But there's stuff to talk about, and it is still Elden Ring, and it is still one of the most anticipated games of the new current generation. So we obviously both watched through it. There's some stuff that I want to break down, a few things that I sort of picked out. I guess the first thing is that it's insanely rich color palette. It feels way more Skyrim-y. It feels way more Fable-y, where you've got like nice big sort of like I kind of noticed that one of the mages has like a Gandalf-style hat on. You're going up against like dragons breathing nice, like obviously breathing fire, and going up against skeletons and everything, but the point is that it's very archetypal fantasy. It feels like, I know that it's written by George Martin, who himself is a big Tolkien fan, but there's a big through line of like Lord of the Rings-y old school fantasy here that I don't know if I'd fully expected. Like that level of color palette, I didn't see coming.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, if you look at some of the things that were on display in this trailer, like there were, skeletons or dragons, like you mentioned, but they weren't necessarily like the Dark Souls skeletons or dragons, you know what I mean? Like they were very much more of your classic fantasy ilk, which is quite interesting because I didn't expect them to go down that route. And it kind of makes me intrigued as to how this world is going to operate and whether or not it's going to be as perhaps, gritty or as twisted as FromSoft's previous games. Like they've dabbled in fantasy before, obviously, but they've almost like filtered it through this kind of like surreal edge, whereas this feels potentially not just judging off this, leak trailer or whatever, but from the leaks that have been before, from the fact that George R.R. Martin is on to write some of the mythology, like you said. I wonder if they're aiming for a world this time that kind of feels a bit more lived in, because for as much as I love the worlds that they've created before, they almost like exist in these dream spaces or like these moments in time where you can't imagine like an average person kind of living there. At least that's the vibe I get from this, but I wonder whether here they're kind of opting for something a bit more different. I'm not necessarily saying one is better or worse than the other. I love me from FromSoft in whatever shape or form. But yeah, that was something that took me kind of a bit by surprise, just because of how colourful it was. It almost definitely felt like they were pushing even further on the stuff they introduced with Sekiro in the over-exaggerated kind of, animations and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. It feels like they're sort of reaching. It's like this is going to be the one. Like it's obviously their most anticipated game so far, and like it's going to be the one that breaks through to the mainstream more than ever. Like everybody's heard of Dark Souls, everybody's played a little bit of Bloodborne, and obviously a little bit of Sekiro. But I feel like those games, I don't feel like people talk about their completion stats much with those games. I feel like everybody sort of bounced off them at some point. Whereas I think with something like this, if it's more potentially accessible at the beginning, or it's this more sort of colourful world, it's got all these different locations that you can explore, then I get that that's going to bring in the wider open world crowd, and maybe that'll be the reason that it can become like their biggest success ever or whatever. Some stuff that I sort of noticed, like in there, some of the world detail, there's like one like collapsed giant, this sort of red magma looking dude who's like the part of the environment is made of this like ex-giant race or whatever. You mentioned like George Martin's the guy that's writing the lore. Apparently he's behind the world creation and a lot of the lore side of it, and then Hidetaka Miyazaki and all the dudes at FromSoft are doing the combat stuff and like the boss design and everything else. Obviously like their roles need to be defined a bit more, I guess, but it makes sense that like George Martin would flesh out this whole ancient race are doing X, Y, Z, and that's why the world looks like this, and we're just playing in the present, but various things have happened in the past. The horse-mounted combat also shown off, which lines up with the older leak, and that's one of the things that they were going to be bringing in. What do you think of the way the combat stuff looked? It was very Soulsy, but they showed stealth as well, like sneaking up behind a dude and doing like a stealth kill as well.
Well, every single time, right? I think I've mentioned this before in news when we were talking about Sekiro. Like every single time they do a new game and it's supposed to be this bigger, more quote-unquote mainstream thing, I always expect them to like completely change the combat design. But yeah, watching this, I was like, oh yeah, this is just an evolution of what they've done before, which is great because the combat in Dark Souls, the combat in Sekiro especially, Bloodborne or whatever, like they've been making these steps. And this, again, looks like they've just built on everything that they've taken before, whether it's like the stealth in Sekiro or, the kind of more basic but still satisfying, like 1v1 boss fights where you've just got like your torch and you've got a sword, you know what I mean? You've just got to fight this big monster. Like, I love that stuff. It is FromSoft's like bread and butter alongside the world design itself. So for me, like, as long as like they obviously, you know, fleshed out a bit and add in new elements, which they obviously had with the mounted combat and stuff, like, for me, that's exactly more or less what I want. I don't want them to change that up too much. I like that foundation that they've already got.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, like, I love the fight against the horse-mounted dude in Sekiro, where you can, like, lock onto him as he's running past you, and you do a little bit more of, like, I guess you would class it as aerial combat, but I like them fleshing out that side of things. There's a very, very small clip that's out there of some horse-mounted combat, but at least it is something you'll be doing, assumedly in between other areas. The thing that I keep going back to is that big leak from a couple of years ago, which, you know, pertains to, like, the layout of the world would be this sort of central field and a bunch of different kingdoms around the outside, and you have to go to each of these kingdoms, get some sort of object that lets you go to the final kingdom at the top of this field. Very like Ocarina of Time style layout. And the more that I see of the leaks, the more it seems to line up with that stuff. One of the massive thing to point out is that in the trailer, some of the text that comes on screen, it does say an all new game, an all new franchise, not necessarily a one-off, which I don't know how much they've talked about that before, but it feels like this obviously could be, you could do a whole bunch of stuff with this. It's not going to be a Bloodborne scenario. It is going to be their next Dark Souls.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it kind of like sounds like, you know what I mean? I don't think you'd whack that on there if you weren't planning on this to be this big, expansive thing. And I don't think you'd get someone like George Martin to, you know, write the law if it wasn't going to be this wider world. Because you can imagine there's going to be a history to whatever location this is that gives you ample opportunities to explore and spin this off into a bunch of different ways. Like, we know, like we keep saying, this is obviously their most ambitious game yet. They're making this huge step forward, and I imagine they're envisioning it to be this franchise or whatever. But, you know, for as much as I want that, as long as Elden Ring is good, I do quite like that FromSoft has been this studio so far, you know, apart from Dark Souls, that they've kind of been able to like do what they want. They go from Dark Souls and then they make Bloodborne and then they make Sekiro, and of course they do Dark Souls 2 and 3, but then they get to make Elden Ring, you know what I mean? There's always something new coming from the studio on a regular basis. Like, they've been pumping those games out. It's only because Elden Ring, it's only because the other games came out so quickly that Elden Ring feels like we've been waiting for this for so long, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, this is not kind of it's not like it's not normal, it's just not really normal for the studio who are used to like these really quick turnarounds and stuff. So I can totally see it being a franchise, and there's definitely like the hype there. Like, this game is weirdly hype. Like, I'd never expected it to get to this level of ferocity where people are just, you know, bigging this up as the next big thing, perhaps rightly or wrongly so. And it's like, I don't know how we got to this point. Obviously FromSoft is awesome. They've been making these great games, but it feels now with this title are they properly broken into, you know, regular households, and everyone is getting excited from their next game in the same way that you would from, you know, previously a CD Projekt Red or like a Naughty Dog or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I was thinking of like Cyberpunk comparisons of just sort of like, okay, let's not get too crazy. Let's just sort of like, you know, like meet our expectations or see how it goes. I don't even know what the general response to all this footage is yet. Like, I saw the stitched together version. Obviously, we're just recording this as our like initial thoughts on it. But I kind of wonder, like you said, there's that really big, intense fandom behind FromSoft stuff, because sort of like rightfully so or whatever, in a sea of, you know, as the gaming industry's got bigger, they're going to do titles for bigger audiences, for more mainstream audiences. And I feel like a lot of people gravitate towards FromSoft because their stuff is like the gamer's game. It's the thing that's going to test you, and you need to sort of get through it and whatever. And I go back and forward on the pros and cons of that stuff. But I kind of wonder what the general reception will be to what feels like From Software goes Fable or FromSoft goes Skyrim in terms of the visuals. Like, looking at even just seeing that amount of daylight, like at the very beginning of the trailer, where you see those two giants pulling some contraption thing, and they're all like locked to it, and they've got these sort of contorted Bloodborne looking heads. Even that in full daylight, I was like, oh, that's kind of, it's a strange like mix. Like, you've got something that is the From Software style contorted macabre sort of enemy design or creature design mixed with this sort of big happy like bright primary color style color palette. That I think that'll be, like I said, I don't see what the response is to that, but my response was, oh my god, I love that, because I love Fable, I love Skyrim. I don't know if you had that feeling as well.
Yeah, same, but I mean, I must admit, I've made this assumption before, like I said, with Sekiro, when that was coming out. I thought, oh, this is their big breakaway. You know, they partnered with Activision, of all publishers, which was mad in and of itself. They've added a jump button, they've added stealth, everything's in the daylight. This is like far more action-focused than the previous games were, but then that very much turned out, even though it did make evolutions, to just be a FromSoft game again. Like, those kind of worries about it maybe being diluted, or maybe them changing too much, like, weren't really founded in here. again, like I said, it just sort of feels like a natural progression from that to something else. You know, I don't want to be like, oh, well, they're changing everything, they're dumbing this down or whatever, because I don't think they are. And even then, it's not necessarily a problem if they did. Like, I feel like FromSoft as a company has always sort of stuck to its guns and more or less done what they want. And if this is what they want to do, you have to have a little bit of confidence in them. You know, I don't think we should judge too harshly on, like you said, this stitched together trailer filmed off screen on like a potato phone. But you know, when it comes to what they've done in the past, their previous work, and what we kind of know about the new game through leaks and rumors and then official stuff, like it just, I am excited for it, man. I really, really am, and I hope we don't get to a point, like you said, where expectations are way too high and it can never live up to it. It becomes this almost mythical thing that we put on a pedestal. But for me personally, it's one of my most anticipated games. Whether it's going to come out this year or next year, like they can take as long as they need, and I'll be happy when I see it, and I hope it's a success.
Yeah, definitely same. I mean, like, my thing was like, it's weird because I think of it as being in the vein of Dark Souls and Bloodborne, because I think because the reveal trailer was like kind of more of the same, this sort of like this one lone wanderer, this sort of traveler, and like, oh, Elden Ring, and this sort of like, you know, like narration over the top that made it feel like this epic sort of continuation of where they left off with like Souls and Bloodborne. And obviously, yeah, Sekiro has done the wider color palette stuff, like actually have cutscenes, actually have a voiced protagonist and things like that. So yeah, I'm super fascinated by it, but I like the direction that they're going, and like I said, it feels like they're trying to reach bigger and bigger audiences, while the core gameplay is still that sort of From Software signature stuff that you would go to them for. But yes, let us know what you think down in the comments below. If you've been able to see the trailer, it might even be pulled by now, or maybe the actual proper version will be live. Usually when we do these things, the proper version goes live that
every
afternoon.
time.
So yeah, I mean, it's some good can come of talking about this potato footage if the actual version comes out. But let us know what you think down in the comments below. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.